What's going on, Dynasty Degenerates? Welcome back into the BDGE Dynasty channel. My name's Adam. If you're new to the channel, make sure you go down and hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any of the content that we're bringing to you here every single week on the game of Dynasty. So this last weekend we had the NFL Combine here, and obviously accordingly, depending on how the players did in their athletic testing, some players' stock overall may be going up. Some players that maybe you weren't really that familiar with at all, those guys are starting to catch some buzz, and vice versa. Some people that went out and didn't do as well, or maybe just didn't do anything at the Combine, their stocks may be dipping a little bit. And overall for the next month and a half, while we're leading up to the NFL draft, this rookie hype and euphoria is going to continue to build. We're going to get to peak levels of rookie fever, and along with rookie fever, people want to just right now get younger assets and young players on their team, especially ones that they think are ascending in value. So what we're going to be doing today is kind of taking a look at some of the top players in the 24 class overall, where they are as far as value goes. So where they're going roughly in startups, and then maybe in the overall market, places like Keep Trade Cut. And ultimately at this point, does it make sense to invest at this cost? All right, so right now we got Jayden Daniels at the top. Shouldn't be any surprise here after an unreal rookie season from him. Jayden Daniels, quarterback 2, asset 2, basically in both places, Keep Trade Cut and for startups. We got Malik Neighbors, second player in this class off the board. Wide receiver 3, both for startups and for Keep Trade Cut. He's the 6th overall asset on Keep Trade Cut, and he's 10th off the board in startups. Then you got Brock Bowers, clear cut tight end 1, basically no discussions. 11th overall player when you look at Keep Trade Cuts ranks, and then you have him as the 8th overall player as far as ADP goes in startups right now. Now, basically, that's 3 players that are pretty easily going to be locked into the first round of your startups. And here's the thing, that makes sense for those 3 players, right? But that's basically 3 rookies in this class, not just going in the first round of startups, but in the conversation for the best overall player at the position. You got 1, 2, and 3 at their position. That's just crazy to think about, all in the same class. Then as we keep going here, you got Brian Thomas Jr., wide receiver 7, 15th overall asset on Keep Trade Cut. Basically not really much different in startups. He's coming off his pick 16. You got Drake May, quarterback 8, 19th overall player in Keep Trade Cut. And then it's a quarterback 10, 23rd overall player when you take a look at startups. So still in the second round. Interesting one here, Caleb Williams at 6. He's quarterback 10, the 22 overall valued player on Keep Trade Cut, and he's quarterback 7 actually in startups, going off the board earlier. He's quarterback 7 and overall asset 18 when you take a look at startups. All right, so then in both places, wide receiver 10, Marvin Harrison Jr., basically not much difference here. 24th overall player on Keep Trade Cut and the 26th pick in startups. Then literally the exact same in both. We have Bo Nix, quarterback 11, 27th pick off the board, and 27th asset in Keep Trade Cut. Then we get to the 9th player, that's Ladd McConkey. Okay, so Ladd McConkey's wide receiver 12, the 29th overall asset in Keep Trade Cut, wide receiver 11 and 28 in startups. Then we got 10 here. Bucky Irving is RB7, overall 40 on Keep Trade Cut, and then just making it inside of the top 3 rounds here, Bucky Irving is RB6 and the 36th overall player in startups. We got Rome Odunze, wide receiver 17 in both places. Not much difference as far as overall player value. 43rd on Keep Trade Cut, 45th pick off the board in startups. Then you got Michael Penix. He's quarterback 15 and 45th as far as Keep Trade Cut goes, and quarterback 17 in startups. He's the 48th pick off the board. We got then J.J. McCarthy. This is the 13th player in this 24 class as the quarterback 18, 50th overall asset, and he's just outside of that in startups. He's quarterback 19, 51st off the board. Then rounding it out here, top 14 players we're going to be going over. This is Xavier Worthy as the wide receiver 20 overall right now on Keep Trade Cut. He's the 57th player asset overall. And then in startups, basically the same thing, but wide receiver 18 in startups and the 55th asset off the board. So basically that's 14 players right now that in startups and Keep Trade Cut, they're right inside of the top 50 range, right? You're talking about 14 assets that are very close to, if not inside of the top 50 overall players that are valued in this class. Now, obviously, all classes aren't created equal, right? When you take a look at this 25 class, people view it overall as weak because the talent at the top, at least for wide receivers and for quarterbacks, isn't really all that great. You can kind of look at maybe like a class like 22, which was also viewed as a weak class, as a similar class as far as value goes. Now, there's definitely some differences in the players overall, right? But what I want to do is actually take a look just to give you some comparative numbers. So you got Devon Achane. He was the 45th overall pick in startups after his rookie season. He's the 6th player for the class. Then you have Dalton Kincaid and the hype that was really starting to build around him. He was the 52nd overall pick in the class. You got Zay Flowers was then the 55th overall pick. JSN was the 58th overall pick. He was coming off of a poor rookie season. People were a little bit iffy on his value, obviously. You got Jordan Addison, the 57th overall player off the board. Bryce Young, also coming off a pretty poor rookie season, was the 66th overall player. And then Jaden Reed was the 12th overall player off the board. So for the 23 class here, you got CJ Stroud. He was the 3rd overall asset coming off of a really great rookie season. Then you had A. Rich coming off as the 2nd overall asset. He was the 8th overall pick in startups. Bijan Robinson was then the 3rd overall player, 15th player off the board in startups, so early round 2. Then you had Jahmyr Gibbs was the 23rd player off the board, 4th overall in the class. Sam Laporta coming off a historic season until we saw what Brock Bowers did to destroy it this year. He was the 25th overall player, so right there at the 2 and 3 turn. And when you take a look at it there, obviously what we think of the players in the 24 class obviously dwarfs what we thought of for the 23 class, and basically what the value for these players overall is going into their 2nd season. So for players going into their sophomore or their 2nd season, we all know that there's a lot of value that's kind of baked into the fact that they're young and they're a youthful asset. In Dynasty, you have these two worlds that are trying to always merge when you're figuring out Dynasty value. And that essentially is overall, what is a player's production? Like, what can they give you for production side of the fantasy football side of things? And then for the Dynasty value, just how young are they? How old are they, right? What is their age? And in general, when it comes to Dynasty value, a lot of the Dynasty value for the players that haven't necessarily produced yet, when we're talking about just age, that comes down to the perception of the community and what we're kind of forecasting and thinking about for the player in the future. So I think when we're talking about these players, for me anyway, kind of considering what their expectations are supposed to be moving forward based on the Dynasty value that they have at the moment, I think that's something that can be a little overlooked or not talked about enough. So when we talk about a lot of these players, did they have like a full body of work as far as their full season, or did they really not do much early? A lot of times for a rookie, their playing time early on may not be very strong, but as the season continues to progress and build, you'll start to see their role increase. And then what can happen in a situation like that is we're looking at maybe a small sample size of 4, 6, 8 games where they played really great football. And that is kind of what we're now projecting in the future for them to do. And so basically when it comes to Dynasty, I'm looking at this 24 class. I'm trying to think about that, right? What is the expectation for them moving forward, kind of where they're at now? And then when I think about the cost relative to that, does it make sense? And is this an investment I want to make, or is this some investment I want to continue to have if I already have them on my team? Now, obviously, each one of my leagues may differ as far as what I'm really looking to do as far as move them or keep them, use them as a cornerstone piece, depending if it's a big lineup league where I'm starting like 12, 13, or if it's a best ball league, or if this is a shallow lineup league. If I was going to be moving one of these three, Brock Bowers would end up being the one just by default, just because of the position he plays. Listen, if you want to build around an elite tight end and you kind of have a really great team and you have the ability, the luxury to do so, completely get it. But you obviously with Brock Bowers, what I would be looking to do is probably tier down and get a lot of my Dynasty value out of the fact that he is one of the tight ends that's going inside of the top 12. When it comes to Brock Bowers, obviously, if you want to build around a tight end, he's the one you want to do that for. So if you have a heavy enough tight end premium in your league and you kind of have the luxury where your team is really, really strong and you want to keep that hammer tight end, I completely get it. And he's the one you want to build around. The one concern about him with expectations moving forward, I think, would be that Brock Bowers is supposed to start producing as the tight end 1 on a points per game basis very clearly. He was the tight end 5 this year in points per game. You take a look at Sam Laporta. He obviously did not live up to the same expectations. Now, I'm not going to compare Brock Bowers to Sam Laporta, but if he doesn't start producing as the tight end 1 soon, I mean, you're already paying out the nose in the first round for a tight end in a startup. But the biggest thing is also going to be, is he going to give you really a Travis Kelce-like edge where he's scoring production-wise at a clip that's worthy of tight end 1 versus tight end 2, 3, and 4 comparatively in Dynasty startup value? Or is he going to be the tight end 1, but realistically what you're getting from some of the top 5, 6, 7 tight ends isn't all that far off as far as production goes relative to the tight end position. So for Brock Bowers, that's the one thing to consider. But if you wanted to build around the tight end, those 3 players, I think, are almost in their own bucket of they could very well be cornerstone pieces. Now, again, each one of these players has different factors and circumstances and reasons why they're here. But off the rip, there's basically 3 players that I kind of see that stick out to me that are in this range, that are here because of value insulation, right? Basically, what people are thinking of them is not as high as it was going into this time last year. And those are going to be Caleb Williams, Marvin Harrison Jr., and Rome Odunze, right? They basically did not live up to the expectations we had for them. Caleb and Marv were coming off the board consensus 101, 102 in the rookie class last year, and inside of that first, second round, early second round in startups. So to see them still, though, inside of the top 25 like this obviously means that they're very highly thought of and the talent is still there, and people are not willing to give up on these players and the situation moving forward. But the rest of the players, right, that we're looking at, they're basically stock up and stock up by a fair amount. Now, the reasons why the stock's up very different for each one of these players, right? And all the hype and buzz around these players, plus the fact that they're so young, basically a lot of the overarching sentiments are that they're only going to continue to develop and improve in their NFL career, and that they're going to get better for our dynasty teams. And while that may be the case for them as far as an NFL player goes, I think that's one of the big fallacies in dynasty you got to be careful of, is just thinking because a player is young, he's only going to continue to improve as far as his dynasty market and stock goes. And a lot of times, one of the things that I think is underlooked, and I think about primarily for players that get into this range, especially when you're seeing the dynasty value go up quite a bit, think about the fact that none of these players are going to continue to get younger, right? Every single year, they're only going to get older, which is going to slowly bring down their dynasty value even as they produce. And basically, when it comes to the fact that all these players have a ton of dynasty value, just stocked into the fact that they're young players, that's where I'm always kind of thinking, should I try to trade out now and see what the market is going to give me? In my league, can I get a trade that makes sense to go ahead and just de-risk myself from the fact that because he's going to be getting older in the near future, and if his production doesn't actually make up for this dynasty value, he's going to dip in price. For example, you take a look at the 23 startup ADP again. Let's look at where these players are going now. So CJ Stroud was the 3rd overall pick a year ago. Now he's the 22nd overall pick, stock down. A-Rich, 8 to 77 in a single year. Obviously, he was a risky asset to begin with, but 8 to 77 in a single year. Then you've got Bijan Robinson, who actually did go stock up. 15 to 9 in the startup. You got Gibbs, 23 to 13. His stock was up as well. Laporta, as you all know, his stock is down 25 to 38. Devon Achane was from 45 to 29. His stock was up as well. Kincaid, stock pretty far down, 52 overall to 87. Zay Flowers was slightly down, overall 55 down to 63. JSN was one of the players that rose in value. He was 58 overall up to 32 after having a very nice sophomore year, especially down the second half of the stretch. Jordan Addison actually had a pretty decent year this year, especially in the back half. He was overall player 57, now is currently 69. Then you got Bryce Young, basically stayed the same, even though he did get his job back and looked really good towards the stretch. Then you have Jaden Reed, 67 overall down to 90. So when we take a look at the 4 players that went up in value from last year, right, at their stock, you're taking a look at Bijan Robinson, Gibbs, Achane. So kind of bucket those all into one thing. They're running backs. And you look at last year, that was probably the lowest that the running back position has been valued maybe ever in the game of Dynasty. At least for as long as I've been playing, that was definitely the lowest it's been. So there was sort of a resurgence of the position, and these guys right now, because they're also young and they did do very well in a points per game perspective, their stock did rise. But then aside from that, you have JSN. But again, for JSN, when it comes to expectations, obviously people wanted to see him, do better in his sophomore year and improve, because he didn't live up to expectations at all in his rookie season. But he destroyed, I think, what anyone had set out for him as expectations, clearly becoming the alpha. And now he had a resurgence because of that, right? And thinking about this conceptually is a little more of a wide view, right? Just in general, a player that's going off of their first season into their second season, right? They're not going to be viewed the same as a rookie that hasn't done anything. So right now, whether it is just a small piece of work or the projection of a guy like JJ McCarthy, or the fact that we saw it in a small window, those are all things that we can tell ourselves a story for what's going to be coming soon into the future. And actually, for most players in Dynasty, their dynasty value is going to peak in between somewhere in that year 1 to year 2 range. So individually, when I'm looking at all the players in this class, absolutely, there's some cases to be made in this class for some of these players that they still, while they're going up at the moment, they could get even higher. They definitely could be cornerstone assets for our team. And again, all these players are inside of the top 50-ish range in Dynasty, and that's extremely high. So just trying to see if I can trade out of some of these players at this point right now for something safer. There's so many different options, and you can also be pretty choosy about what you want to get back in return. For example, a guy like Ladd McConkey, right? Ladd McConkey is wide receiver 11, again, towards the top 25 overall assets. When you look at Ladd last year, definitely some of the reasons to think highly of him and better going into this coming up year is look at the back half splits of the season, right? From weeks 11 to week 18 of the year, LA definitely started to ramp up their, passing volume overall. Harbaugh wanted to just ground and pound the ball in the early part of the year. Then they started opening it up, and Ladd McConkey from weeks 11 to week 18, you can see he was a wide receiver 1 overall points per game, right? But if you look at his whole body of work the whole season, wide receiver 19, which isn't too bad. Here's the question. When you're looking at Ladd McConkey at wide receiver 11, is Ladd McConkey have a lot to go up in value? Like if things continue to break right, what does Ladd McConkey realistically probably have to gain? And I think one of the really nice things for Ladd McConkey is kind of right where he's valued at this moment, right? Ladd's one of these players where I think you have an opportunity to be pretty flexible in what you want to do or how you'd like to try to move off of him, depending on what your team needs are. So for example, if you're in a lineup league where you're pretty loaded at receiver, you are in a position right now because Ladd McConkey is wide receiver 11 range. You could definitely put Ladd McConkey in a trade and see if you can tier up. He can get you to the discussion of some elite wide receivers if you wanted to go up and tier up. I think obviously another thing you could do is just kind of de-risk yourself by seeing, can I tier down? Can I go from Ladd McConkey to Devontae Smith and a plus where I'm getting, a second, early second or a late first in this class? I think there's a lot of different ways that you can end up getting off of Ladd McConkey's value right now to where you're able to put in production into your team. Now, look, that's not to say you have to move off Ladd McConkey or that I think that Ladd McConkey is a bad player in Dynasty. It's just the point where this offseason, he's going to be such a highly desired asset, and a lot of his value is tied into the fact that he is so young. Because trading off him at this point, not only are you going to be able to get a pretty damn good return, but you're going to be able to kind of dictate more so what type of return you get because of the way he's viewed in Dynasty. And again, we're talking about for the majority of these players, right? Their stock is up, and that's why they're inside of the top 50, 55 players in Dynasty. And you think about what's coming on with this 2025 class here, it's very easy to forget that a lot of these players that have this really high Dynasty value at the moment, you got in the late part of the first round or in the second round or even later, the third, fourth round in your rookie drafts. And when you're trading away players at this point where they had that huge surge in value, you're getting out closer to towards the top of their price. Obviously, you don't know this for each one of these players. There could be some guys that end up even going higher in value and be cornerstone assets. And if you were to trade away a lot of these players right now, you're pretty likely, I think, to get a tier down where you're getting a player that has similar ranges of outcomes as far as the production goes. Maybe they don't quite have that same youth appeal, that name cachet. However, you're able to get a plus, which is a draft pick to re-roll yourself into a chance in this 25 class to have a bump in value as well. Looking at a guy like Bucky Irving, he's at RB7 right now, 40th overall player. I think realistically, range of outcomes on the high end, he doesn't really have a whole lot to improve as far as his Dynasty value goes. Now, he could end up being a difference maker for your team as far as production, but again, as far as the value in Dynasty, I think he has a lot more to lose than he does to gain. I think here for the quarterbacks, there's a couple of different discussions though, with Penix and with McCarthy. Realistically, it seems really high that their values at this point, but they're kind of just in that wild card range realistically when you look at the quarterback landscape, right? Quarterback 18 and 17-ish for these guys. Yeah, it would be nice to be able to trade out of them, but I don't know that you're going to realistically be able to move off of them and trade up into a quarterback that you feel a lot better about. And tearing down from them kind of gets pretty scary pretty quick. So I wouldn't say that they're necessarily players that you have to move off of. I would definitely be exploring it. But guys like Caleb Williams, Drake May, and Bo Nix, even if you really like them, realistically, what is there to go up as far as Dynasty value goes? I think I'd be looking to see with all of them, like, can I go tier up into one of the elite rushing style quarterbacks? It's still probably going to cost you quite a bit. But if you get into that discussion, I would be looking to probably do that. As far as tiering down goes, there's probably a lot of different options, which will net you more than a first in value back. Again, taking a look at a guy like Xavier Worthy, right? He's at wide receiver 20 right now. Definitely ascended a lot in the second half of the year. And I'm sure right now the conversations are out there. Is he really going to be the one in the Kansas City Chiefs offense? We got Rashee Rice going to be coming back, returning from his injury. And they're always probably going to be trying to attach weapons to Patrick Mahomes. So how much higher can he go than wide receiver 20? Or is this a safe point for you to try to see if you could pivot out into something that's not quite as, enticing as a young player like Xavier Worthy? And overall, if I'm going out and trying to trade for these players, I think I'd be really cautious about doing that. I wouldn't suggest trading for a lot of the 2024 rookies right now in this offseason when their cost is so high. Obviously, every single league is different. I have seen some trades gone through, which is pretty reasonable. So maybe some trades like that do exist in your league. But I think overall right now, I'd be pretty cautious about trading for some of these players just because their cost is so high. I know that's probably not the most fun thing to hear. Go trade away your really young player that's just coming off a great rookie season and could be budding into a potential superstar. I get it from that standpoint, but if you think about it overall and how these players right now are getting extremely high in dynasty value, just as a process thing, I think it's important to talk about right now, thinking about moving some of these 24 rookies that are incredibly highly valued and maybe not think of all of them as cornerstone assets to your team. That's all I got. Let me know what you thought of this video down in the comments below. Let me know what you'd be looking for in some trades for these players, or if I'm crazy, there's no way you're moving them, you're diamond handing these players. See you next week. I'm out of here. Peace.